say good morning, but it's afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our fourth session of the UDO University, sponsored by the City of Charlotte's Development Center. Today, our topic will be subdivision, network, and access, and other infrastructure. Go to the next slide. We'll just go over some meeting protocols for those of you who have sat through sessions 1, 2, 3. Sorry for the repeat, but we do have some new folks joining us, and we do want to welcome everybody. The Charlotte Development Center staff will narrate the presentations. Today, our presenters are Josh Weaver and Jake Carpenter with the Subdivision and CDOT teams. Reminder to please enter any questions or comments in the chat. We'll be answering these questions during the presentations and also at the end of the presentation. Also, if time allows at the end, we'll take on any additional questions that we have time to answer. And if a question cannot be answered, we will so note and follow up with a response posted on the website and reviewed at the next session, which would be next Friday. Next slide.
It is not.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Just want to briefly go over what the mission statement for the UDO University. The purpose of the university is to acquaint attendees with the City of Charlotte's requirements and processes affiliated with the currently adopted Unified Development Ordinance, also known as the UDO. Comments made at the UDO University sessions are intended to provide guidance and are non-binding on the formal review of the development plans. Next slide. Just briefly want to go over this. We do have 10 sessions. We are in session 4 today. As you know, registration will be required for each session. Just register online at charlotteudo.org and click on the UDO University tab. All of our sessions will be on Fridays from 1 to 2:30. All the sessions are virtual via Zoom, and they are recorded and posted on the Charlotte UDO website at the Charlotte University tab. We usually have those posted by our friends Yolanda Jones and Kate Marshall in the planning communication team by close of business on Mondays. All these are going to be facilitated by various agencies within the Development Center, and we hope that it's an opportunity for you to learn and to ask questions. I think I'm now going to turn it over to Josh Weaver, who again heads up our subdivision team. And Josh is going to take it over from here and going to start with our purpose for meeting today. Josh.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Josh Weaver. I'm the subdivision administrator for the City of Charlotte. Jake Carpenter and I will be presenting today, and we're going to talk about the what is and what is not a subdivision. We're going to review the requirements for review and approval of subdivisions and what we call exempt subdivisions. We're going to talk about how development builds connectivity and contributes to the city's transportation network. We will talk a little bit about how the UDO provides guidance for access to properties through driveways and cross access. And we're going to talk how the development or the UDO provides guidance for development of other infrastructure throughout the city. So what is SSI? SSI stands for subdivisions, streets, and infrastructure. And subdivisions, like I said earlier, can be either things that are they're defined by state statute, which means that a subdivision usually is the division of a piece of property into more than from one to more than one parcel. It also involves the development of new streets, and or it could be a multiple building site. Things that are exempt from the subdivision ordinance are also defined by state statute, and those are for example, a parcel that's less than 2 acres into no more than 3 lots, or combining lots from, say, 3 into 1. That's exempt. Subdivisions include anything that's building a new public street. So we're taking the street requirements, and those are how the street gets built: curb and gutter, sidewalk, landscaping strips. All of that is part of SSI. And we also, SSI is also other infrastructure, which is CAT's bus stops, it's Charlotte Water, and the drainage that goes with that. So how do we get to SSI? With the UDO, we've been trying to consolidate requirements. So we took the street requirements from subdivision, street improvement requirements from Chapter 19, and street requirements that were in the zoning ordinance, and combined them into the articles of SSI. So we have articles 29 through 34 of UDO are what we refer to as SSI. And today we're going to be talking about articles 29 through 31 and 34. And in the next time we talk about subdivision and streets, we'll be talking about 32 and 33. So Article 29 is the introduction to subdivision. It includes the purpose and applicability. So the purpose of the subdivision is to allow for and promote orderly development within the city and its extraterritorial jurisdiction, or as we refer to as ETJ. It applies to development activity throughout the city and the ETJ. It provides guidance for all the development, and it also sets forth the administrator for subdivision, streets, and infrastructure. So subdivision is defined by state statute. It's divisions of land into 2 or more lots for immediate or future purpose of sale or development of residential and non-residential development. It can include multiple building sites or multiple multi-site projects, and projects that dedicate new streets or rights of way or changes to new and existing streets. There are instances that are also laid out by state statute that development is exempt from the subdivision ordinance or the subdivision portion of the UDO. Those 13 exemptions are laid out in Article 30, and you're welcome to review them. Like I said earlier, some of that is less than 2 acres, no more than 3 lots. But those are also reviewed to verify that those exemptions truly are exempt before they're recorded at the Registry of Deeds, and that the lots that are created comply with the UDO. So Article 30 also lays out what is a major subdivision and what is a minor subdivision. Major subdivisions always include new streets. They involve or set forth utility requirements. If it's a multiple building site, it's always a major subdivision. If it involves drainage improvements between lots, that's always a major subdivision, and it provides for connectivity. Minor subdivisions are subdivisions that meet the definition of a subdivision but don't require new streets. They may require curb, gutter, and sidewalk, but they are more limited than a major subdivision. So Article 30 also sets forth the criteria that's required for when a major subdivision is submitted for review. So it sets forth the street design for residential and non-residential subdivisions. It defines what half streets are and how those are dealt with when half streets are connected to. Its goal is to preserve mature trees and natural vegetation, to provide for areas for parks and schools and greenways. It sets forth that when you have a thoroughfare and residential is developing next to it, that there are streets that are parallel to those thoroughfares to provide for access. It also sets up for public facilities such as fire stations or police stations, and allows for development to contribute towards those sites. We review for street names and easements through properties. As part of the subdivision review, Charlotte Water also reviews for water and sewer. We look for flooding requirements, and if you're on the lake, requiring access to the water. So this is the subdivision process that's laid out in Article 30. Generally, there's a sketch plan review that is a high-level review where we try to catch pitfalls within a proposed development. It's more of a high-level review. Then we move from a sketch plan to incorporating those comments. The designer submits a preliminary plan or construction documents. Those construction documents lay out the grades, the roads, lots, and how a new subdivision would be developed. Once we go through a few rounds of those reviews and a project gets approval, then they can move forward with grading and construction begins. And then after they're all done constructing, a final plat is recorded and that's submitted for review. And before the plat can be recorded, a performance bond is put in place so that we can guarantee that the public infrastructure is completed per the plan. So Article 31 sets up the building of transportation networks, and it does that in order to support growth and development. It connects the places that we live, work, and play with the places we want to be. So we're trying to set up multiple ways in and out of projects so that we're not all funneling onto thoroughfares and creating more traffic. So it creates routes and mode choices within projects, and it supports efficient public services. So most of the street network we have in the city has been created through development and through the subdivision ordinance requirements. So Article 31 sets up for the network of streets. It provides for criteria of when internal and external connections are required, and it sets criteria for preferred and maximum block lengths. So when a project is submitted, it's evaluated based on its property lengths, and those property lengths and preferred block lengths are set by our place types overall growth framework, so that depending on the place type, the preferred block length may get greater or smaller, and then we're setting the blocks that are appropriate for the development as it occurs. We also have a maximum block length so that we can take into account physical characteristics of a site and deal with topography and anything else that might occur. So with the flexibility that's built into the ordinance, like I said, the things that might allow or might need flexibility include physical obstacles such as freeways and railroads, gas pipelines. But it also might mean natural obstacles such as steep slopes and wetlands, creeks, streams, or floodway. Or it could be the characteristics of the property, such as the shape or what's surrounding it, such as manufacturing or warehousing. Jake's going to take over here and talk about a little bit about cross-access.
Thanks, Josh. I'm Jake Carpenter with CDOT Land Development section, and I'll start with 31.2, which is cross-access. So this is a new requirement for the city. This was not in previous ordinance, and it involves connections between properties for safe and comfortable access for pedestrians, cyclists, and motor vehicles. So this would be similar to some of the subdivision requirements, but not for a full street. Next slide. So the goal of this cross-access requirement is to essentially provide alternatives for vehicles traveling between parcels so that they don't have to access the adjacent arterial and thus reduce conflict for pedestrians and vehicular traffic. So these short trips can be taken in between land uses and parcels without traveling to the arterial, down, and back into another parcel. So it really supports multimodal street design and helps with traffic congestion as well. Next slide. So the cross-access requirements are set out in this section, and it applies to two separate types of parcels. So the first would be parcels fronting arterial streets, and the cross-access requirement for parcels fronting arterial streets would be triggered by subdivision as defined in 30.3A or a new principal structure. And so the parcel, there's also a requirement for parcels that are not on arterials if they are on a collector or local streets, but are adjacent to a corner parcel on an arterial. And so that would have the same triggers, triggered by subdivision or a new principal structure, but would have to be adjacent to these parcels. And you can see just an example of a couple of parcels that would fit this. With Mallard Creek Church would be the arterial in this scenario on the right, and LaGranger on the right would be the local or collector. And so you can see the the parcel to the south is an example of one that may trigger this cross-access requirement on a local or collector street. So when these requirements are triggered, it could be satisfied by a drive aisle, an alley, or a service drive. But the stated minimum is 20 feet of pavement with two-way traffic. And so if you have a parcel that is triggered a cross-access requirement, you would be required to provide a stub if there's no connection currently present. And if there is a stub on the adjacent parcel, then you would make your connection to that stub. Next slide. So there are modifications and exemptions to this requirement. The modifications would be maybe similar to what we currently do, a minor modification for maybe sidewalks or other things. And this would be determined or be approved by the CDOT director. So things that could have a modification to get rid of this requirement could be existing obstructions such as a natural feature or infrastructure. So if there's a, maybe if there's a stream crossing or an existing building that's present on the adjacent parcel, or if there's significant topographical differences between the parcels, or other conditions that make it infeasible including security, if there's land uses with certain secure requirements, proportionality of the construction of this type of cross access, or if there's an adjacent structure that is parking deck that can't be accessed. There are exceptions to when this is required. So for lower intensity residential, N1A through E, this would not be a requirement. And also if there's incompatible uses. And one example is that's listed is manufacturing and logistics place type with a neighborhood 1 and 2 place type. And there's some others listed in there that would not meet these requirements. And going back for 1 second, Josh, just a note that recorded easements are required. So on the final plat for subdivision, or on a separate instrument when there is no plat involved. Next slide. So 31.3 is driveways and street access. So this formalizes the review and approval of new and existing driveways and incorporates a lot of items that may have been found in the old version of the City of Charlotte driveway regulations. In this section, there is references to the streets manual for a lot of specifics on driveway access and details. And it also references the streets manual for turn lane requirements. Next slide. So the streets manual is something that we will cover in the next session that Josh mentioned when we cover 32 and 33. And it's a council adopted document. So it's a supporting document to the UDO, but it is council adopted. And the streets manual has 3 components. It has the streets map document, which is the online map that you can access. It has driveway and access rules, and then also the CTR, the Comprehensive Transportation Review, which is the new process for review of developments that includes multimodal, transportation demand management, and our TIS guidelines. So we will cover these in the separate UDO University session. And if you want to take a look at some of these documents, you can go to the UDO portal page. And down at the bottom, there is a link to the UDO supporting documentation, and they can be found there for a review. So 31.3A has the plan approval requirements. So all new driveways to public and private streets, all driveways to public and private streets require plan approval if you are doing construction, relocation, or alteration. Single family driveways are exempt from plan approval, but there's some requirements that they must meet separately. So when do existing driveways require plan approval? So if you have a property that has a subdivision, you have a new principal structure, there's a use change for an existing building that's 5,000 square feet or more, or there's 20 additional trips added to the property. Additionally, if you expand an existing building by more than 1,000 square feet, or on-site parking layout or circulation changes, you would be required to get plan approval for that driveway. 31.3B goes over access management. So the driveway location and placement is more defined in the streets manual. So in the streets manual, as far as driveway location and placement, you would find guidance on preferred access location. So if you have a property that has multiple frontages, the streets manual gives guidance on where the driveway access is preferred. Also the amount and spacing of access, and then typical access restrictions. And so all that is going to be found in the streets manual, and we'll go over that on the next session when we talk about sort of our standards and design requirements. Some of the things that you'll recognize from current ordinance: driveways are required to be 200 feet from signalized intersections, 75 feet from unsignalized intersection. And if you have an existing driveway that you are relocating along a site, then you will need to either replace streetscape or build new streetscape at that location. This section goes over sometimes when access could potentially be limited for a driveway. So if you're within 200 feet of a signal, you could see some reduced access within the physical limits of existing or proposed dual left turn lanes. If there are existing safety or operational issues within the segment of street, or if there are some site distance requirements that can't be met with a full access or 3/4 access, you might have limited access in those scenarios. So 31.3C talks about driveway alignment and internal access. And again, channelization and design would be in the streets manual. And so this is where you would find information on CLDSM driveway types, including where and when to use each. And that's again in the streets manual. It does give some guidance on approach angle and some of the reasons why we might accept less than a 90-degree approach angle. And it does have a requirement to align with existing driveways where possible. (31.3D) talks through site distance. The driveway policy for site distance, it references the streets manual and AASHTO guidelines, and the streets manual does reference the current site distance policy. So a lot of this policy is going to remain unchanged from previous standards, and is referenced in the streets manual. For site triangles, it is included in 31.3D. Public street intersections have the 50 by 50 site triangle. Driveways have 10 by 10. And it should be noted for the 10 by 10 site triangles that it does specifically call out that these are to be taken from the back of right-of-way or sidewalk, whichever is the most conservative. So the remaining items in Article 31.3 are talk about turn lanes, and essentially, again, turn lanes are referenced in the streets manual. So requirements for those are going to have to do with your CTR or other requirements. Item G talks through traffic signal installation and modification, and essentially lays out that when development occurs, if there are required new signals or modifications to existing signals, the owner or developer is responsible for those changes, and the details should be outlined in a signal agreement that is signed between the owner or developer and the city. Article 31.3H just essentially calls out driveway access to arterials is not allowed for the residential buildings that you see listed, single family, duplex, triplex, quadruplex, that also have collector or local access. And so that was it for Article 31. A lot of those items will be covered in detail when we talk through the streets manual. But Article 34, it's very short and essentially just defines some of the other infrastructure items, drainage, water supply and wastewater sewer, and underground utilities. And just a note that water supply and wastewater sewer should be installed and connected to either public or private systems. And I think that's all we have for today. And so I will throw it back to the group for to see what questions have popped up in chat.
Thank you both for presenting. We do have a pretty lively chat. However, it looks like a lot of the questions that have been asked have been answered. Just want to go back and be sure. Give me just 1 second. If anyone else has additional questions, because it does look like these have been answered, please place them in the chat that we can answer those for you. Okay, and it looks like, okay. I'm sorry, it looks like Carla did ask a question that has not yet been answered. Oh, and thank you, Carla, for that as well. It looks like she has a question that came through via her registration. We'll ask that. Her first question, right of way or sidewalk most conservative, how does that comply with state law, which sets out the measurement? Who wants to try to answer that?
Carla, this is Julian Burton with CDOT. I'm jumping in to help answer some of these questions. Could you clarify that question a little bit in the chat, if you wouldn't mind? Unless someone else on my end knows how to take a shot at that. I'm not sure exactly what you're getting at.
Okay. And while that is happening, we do have a question from Joe. Is there a minimum driveway distance on a site for CDOT roads that are not a part of block length requirements? Anyone from CDOT that might be able to answer that?
For that one, we'd probably need more clarification on the question on what is meant by a minimum driveway distance on a site.
And while we get that clarification, Carla, your question you asked about the sublot platting process, it depends on whether it's part of a full-blown major subdivision or if it's a standalone lot. But either way, those sublots are submitted on a final plat and are reviewed to either make sure they match the approved construction plan or that they meet the zoning or UDO requirements. And once that's verified, then it can be recorded at the Register of Deeds.
Thanks, Josh. It looks like, thanks, Carla, for typing out the sort of background. She writes, state law change missed in the first draft UDO. UDO was changed to reflect correct graphic, but it never said sidewalk or most conservative. I don't know if that helps to clarify. Just asking.
Carla, at least for me, I think I'm still not exactly sure what you're referring to. Maybe we can, I have your contact information. If it's okay, I can circle up with you after the meeting and we can try and get that clarified.
I don't know if you can see Jacob. I'm thinking that's for you from High. This is Jake.
I'll just to Carla's question a little bit. If my comment about the most conservative was confusing, that was really meant from in relation to the 10 by 10 site triangles that are required. Those are specifically measured from the back of right of way or sidewalk. The general site distance measurements are going to be according to AASHTO guidelines.
Okay, So again, looks like we got a question from Hi about, Jake, could you clarify on the ST on public street intersections, 50 by 50, 35 by 35, measured from RW? Sorry, guys, some of this technical information I might not be reading correctly versus back of curb. Also, ST at public streets and private drives. There were different guides in the past from CDOT. And that's some of our CDOT. Right?
Yep, and Josh, if you can go back to 31.3D, you can see the 50 by 50 is going to be measured just as you see there along the back of curb. And starting from the midpoint of the radius on back of curb. And that's for public street intersections.
Okay. David Smith asked any update on a timeline for the text amendment coming out. It still seems pointless to study, update our understanding of the rules when they are still changing. And you are right, things are ever changing. This is not a end all be all document. So I don't think that will happen ever and just be like, this is the end of it. So I don't know if anyone has the ability to talk to text amendment changes and when they might be arriving.
This is Kevin May in the planning department. I'll take a crack at it, Yolanda. Thank you for the question, David. At a very high level, I can tell you that the planning department is currently working on a cleanup text amendment, and by cleanup I mean kind of addressing some issues that may be errors in the adopted UDO that we're trying to ensure the smooth implementation and administration of the UDO prior to June 1. So we have a text amendment in the hopper for that purpose that is scheduled to go to a public hearing and have a decision requested of council prior to the implementation of the UDO on June 1st. So that's kind of our big initiative on the text amendment right now. But as Yolanda mentioned, this is not meant to be a static document. It's meant to be a living and dynamic document. So this first text amendment is just kind of tightening the UDO where it may need to be, but there will be an ongoing effort to update it as needed. So you're right. It seems maybe, I wouldn't say pointless. I think there's a certain level that we're trying to convey to the community educationally to get them used to a new document, a new regulatory document. And so that's really what our effort is to be out there and educate the community and just be very vocal of the fact that things are going to be slightly different on June 1st. And so that's kind of how we're looking at this. But I'm sure there will be engagement ongoing as the UDO is updated as well. So.
Thank you, Kevin. Carla clarified that her question was answered, or the clarity that she was seeking was answered. Then she does have a new question for Josh. Sublot for infill, do sublots have to go to curb or can they float on the lot?
Sublots are sublots because they don't have to meet the overall lot criteria. And as far as I'm aware, it doesn't specify they have to go to the curb. Most people I've seen, since they're involved with townhomes, in order to make sure that everybody provides access, they go straight to the right of way or curb. But I'm not aware that the ordinance provides for any specific requirements.
Thanks, Josh. Eddie Moore writes, what is the required site distance triangle where a private alley intersects a public street?
So I'll jump in. I'll let Jake jump in if I say anything wrong, but we don't have a standard site distance requirement for an alley connecting with a public street. So that would be something that would be handled most likely just through the land development process as the project gets submitted.
Yeah, and I'll just add that this, what you see here are the site triangles that are codified in the UDO ordinance, but as of now, it also references the Charlotte site distance policy, which has some of the same standards that have been applied previously in the land development process for CDOT.
Brittany Baldwin asked, and I think maybe this was sent in error directly to me, but regarding exemptions, are they allowable through special use permitting, or is there another process for approval? And I will paste that question in the chat for everyone to be able to see. Just possibly came to me. Again, this is coming from Brittany Baldwin. And it reads, regarding exemptions, are they allowable through special use permitting, or is there another process for approval?
Yolanda, this is Kevin with planning again. I'm sorry, could we potentially get them to give us a little bit more detail on exemptions for what? Is it
Okay.
the exempt subdivisions? Is it a different exemption or exception for other things covered?
Okay, Brittany, if you wouldn't mind typing that clarification in the chat, we will follow back up with that one. Eddie Moore asks, as a follow-up, what is the current requirement or required distance? Wait, did I already ask that? I'm so sorry. I think I've already asked that. Hi asks, one more clarification on site triangles. Is 35 by 35 not applicable anymore?
So I think the site distance policy, which is still referenced in the adopted document, references the 35 by 35, but we'll have to follow up separately to kind of mesh the two and provide a full answer on that one.
Brittany, I
has
see
clarified. Yeah, it looks like she clarified.
your clarification. Exempt subdivisions are reviewed through our plating process, and they're allowed by right. There's no additional process. If you're exempt, it's allowed, and it's an administrative review. But maybe Jake can talk to existing driveways. I don't know of exemptions.
So existing driveway. So the question is, what's the process for exemptions on plan approval for existing driveways? Is that what I'm understanding? I think a lot of the exemption processes are still being finalized to exactly how we would physically go through those processes, but we'll be able to provide more information as we get closer to UDO date.
Hi, Carla. It looks like she asks about the follow-up questions. So I'm going to ask Kate to drop in the email address as well to reach out to the team, but we do have your email. So when you signed up and registered, the team that needed to do more research, they can reach out to you via email. They have your direct contact information. But again, Kate just dropped in the actual chat. If you have questions after this or you need clarification after this, there is an email box that is monitored for you to send your direct questions for answers, monitored by our staff that will get the right person to be able to reach back out to you. But to Carla's point, if someone needs to reach back out to you because they need to give you additional information that we could not provide in this session, we do have your email address from registration to reach back out. She writes, no, I meant that Jay said he's answered the 35 site question. How do we all get that answer? We can definitely, if you like, we could reach out to everyone with that answer. If it's something that you guys think would be helpful, we could do that. But if it's a specific, and for anyone who asked that question, we could do that as well, or send it out to the full group. Totally if you guys. But again, if you have specific questions and you need clarification, please reach out to that email. It is again monitored, and they will be able to reach directly back out to you. Eric asks, will 35 and 35 or 50 and 50 site triangles apply to TOD, or will all urban zonings be exempt? Can anyone answer that one?
Yeah, I can jump in on that, Eric. So there's a list of higher intensity zoning districts that would be exempt, and that would include TOD among others, and those are listed in there in the UDO.
Thank you. And we will definitely, thank you for that, Patricia. We can definitely send that out. We do have that. We can send it out to this group as we have the registration emails. Dion K asks, is there a variance that they are speaking of? I don't know if that needs further explanation from the team. Or can you guys answer that?
I'll just chime in and say that what we're talking about here, there are some items within that we've discussed when we talk about exemptions or modifications that are not, they're not variance or zoning administrator related. So these are items that can be approved through, sometimes it's the planning director, sometimes it's the CDOT director that can give these modifications. And so those were the items for CDOT that I listed earlier in regards to a few of those items with cross access and others. And so that would be like a CDOT director related approval, and it wouldn't have to go through the zoning administrator variance process.
Thank you for that. It's like we have come to the end of the questions. I want to be sure that I didn't miss anything, or if anyone has any additional questions, please drop those in the chat. I think Dion says thank you, Jacob, for that, and so does Brittany for the follow-up. Okay. Doesn't look like we have any additional questions in the chat right now. So again, we do have, just to kind of reiterate and drive home, the email address that is available. If you have follow-up questions, please note that I won't promise that the answers are going to be immediate. They do need to work through a process to get to the right staff member to be able to respond to you. But if you send your questions to that email address, someone will follow up with you. And it looks like that is the end of our questions. Thank you all for your attendance. Again, just to reiterate, this is a recorded session and will be available on the charlotteudo.org website under UDO University. We attempt to upload those within 48 business hours of the session ending, including the presentation. Thank you, everyone.